the Eindhoven Innovation Café. My name is Charlotte Grun and I will be a moderator today. And we have amazing guests today. But before we go there, I have one very, very practical question. Because after the Innovation Café we have some drinks, but it's also possible to enjoy a dinner. Does anybody want to join the dinner? Oh, okay, that's clear. Perfect. Okay, then I have a big applause. We have a big applause for Anne Moon. She's the owner of the Kazerne. Yeah? Welcome, Anne Moon. Can you tell us a little bit about the Kazerne and who you are?
Hi, welcome back everyone. I'm Anne Moon, I'm a designer and I'm super proud of my colleagues. And I think it's really important that designers talk to techies, that we bridge our left and brain halves and that we start working together. Because we have, I think, a few societal problems and we need to face them. Here in Eindhoven we have the superpowers to connect to each other. So let's do that. That's what we do here in Kazerne. We have exhibitions. We have a program, I will tell you later in another Innovation Café more about. But we started last week the weekly Innovation Café again, and I'm so happy to see you all back. And yeah, let's give a hand to. Oh no, you are in charge tonight.
Oh no. This is how we always do that. We collaborate. That's also how we know each other. Maybe that's also interesting to tell. I'm also a designer based in Eindhoven, and we work together a lot. Now I'm standing behind the mic, but normally I'm also a strategic designer and design researcher and designer from the Design Academy. And we work together on Brainports, where we try to find, well, we did a big experiment in hospital in the Katrina ziekenhuis, but we talk about that another time, because we have some amazing guests. Can you tell us a little bit about the guests on the moment?
I think they can do that way better themselves. But
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm very curious. Why did you choose these guests? Maybe I have to tell them their names. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Cocosmos. Sorry, it's very hard to pronounce, but Cososmos, right? We practice it together with Aya Bergkamp and Filemon Jasma.
Can you give us the next slide, because the names will be there?
Okay.
I think we need to do it. We're a bit close. Yes, there it is.
Why did you choose them to come? I'm very curious.
Because I was looking for democratic designers and who are participating in the democratisering from the design participation in and yeah, I discovered what they do. And last week they sold, or they had almost half of the tickets the first week already, and I thought, oh, okay. And then I discovered what they do, and I think they are a very good connection, that's also why, to Dembrane, who are contributing to the democratic dialogue via AI. And I thought there might be a connection between. That could be for an interesting debate. And Evelyn was already here last week during the City Vision event, and she made a beautiful handout on summary of what we spoke about. Yeah, and also that we are going to dive into deeper later.
I think you got it really right, because I've heard, we had a small talk before we started, and I've heard that you are already collaborating together. So we talk about it a bit later for that. Yeah? So first we start with Dembrane. Give a big applause for Eveline Nieuwenberg and Johan Teuns.
All right. Testing. Yes, I hear myself. Good day, everybody. The clicker we also have. Now is it? Live? Yes, all right. Good evening. My name is Evelien and this is Jorim, and we are the co-founders of Dembrane. And Dembrane stands for Democratic Membrane. Just like in biology, the membrane facilitates communication and information in the biological system. That's what we want to build in the technical side for the smart city, but with a human approach. But let's start at the beginning, because every good story has a meet cute. And our story began when we met each other 10 years ago, which you see on the left side. And when we met, I have to say, sparks were flying, but not in a good way. We did not really like each other. And it took some time working together to realize that the fact that we are so different as people, that actually has a lot of potential. And that's how we sharpened each other. And this story is a little intro to the story that we're talking about today as well. Two worlds, democracy and AI, that seem to not to have a lot in common, starting very different at its core. However,
you want me to take over?
Yeah.
Too different. So, on the one side, democracy, it's about collective decision making, it's about participation, it's about the idea and the feeling that we're all in it together. And we need technology to do democracy, right? You need to vote, so you need writing, you need all these different things. And democracy today is, at its biggest that it's ever been. It's the most complex, democratic societies are the most complex that they've ever been. On the other hand, we have AI. AI also at its most complex that it's ever been. Obviously, we've all heard of the new rise of generative AI, and we have our own opinions about that. And both of these systems, both of these patterns have their own challenges that need to be addressed. So, not a lot of people knew about AI or were working with AI until about 2 years ago, when ChatGPT burst on the scene. Was the first technology company to get 100 million users in a month, I believe. And with the rise of these new kinds of AI came the rise of questions like, how should AI behave? Not a lot of people were interested in this question until it started affecting all of our lives and our livelihoods. So how should AI behave? So that's a bit of a weird question. The people that are building the AI have 100% total control over how it works, and it's affecting all of us. On the other hand, you have democracy, which is supposed to be about all of us. Can we have an impact on AI? So we have two different kinds of problems. On the one hand, in democracy, we're seeing a kind of information overload where we're kind of processing bottleneck. A lot of people in democratic societies feel kind of underrepresented by representative democracy. They feel like they're not being heard. They're feeling apathetic. Maybe they're voting less. But primarily they're feeling like they can't contribute in the way that they want to, and that if we do open the doors to contribution, that the amount of information is completely overwhelming and we don't know what to do with it. And so leaders tend to close those doors, do things behind closed doors, which again decreases trust, and you have these cycles of increasing distrust and complexity. On the other hand, you have AI, which is just kind of like a runaway train of tech investment where they're just making them bigger and better and bigger and better with actually very little oversight about what's actually happening and whether or not we agree with it. So we have a social deficit. And so the question that we asked ourselves 2 years ago, and apparently a lot of people were asking themselves, is can they actually help each other? And at Dembrane, we think they can. We think that democracy can help AI, and we think that AI can help democracy. We just didn't know exactly how.
And this brings us to what happened last year. Last year with Dembrane, we won a grant from OpenAI from over 1,000 applications worldwide. They picked our pitch because what we really believe is that by going into conversation with each other, practicing democracy through talking, is how we find out what is our common ground, what are our shared values, and this is something you can actually use to steer AI. At the same time, AI can also really help capture the conversation, figure out what are the arguments, how do we reach a certain point, rather than just reporting on the outcomes. So this is also what we do in Dembrane, where AI often is about, many tools are a person interacting with a screen. At Dembrane, we really try to design a system that helps people come into conversation with each other face to face to stimulate the human element and support it with AI in the slogan that we have, every voice is heard and no good idea is lost.
So that was last year, and we built Common Ground, the application to essentially fine-tune AI based on democratic preferences. A lot to go into there. But we learned a lot from Common Ground, and we took those learnings into our next kind of step on the roadmap, which was Dembrane Echo. And again, the goal stays the same. The goal is solve wicked problems like AI alignment, solve wicked problems like the energy transition, or help solve them. With a foundation of how do we facilitate the wisdom of the crowd? How do we make sure that the crowd coming together leads to all the good ideas bubbling up rather than all of the bad ideas bubbling up? And the idea there is that the key learning loop here can be that, again, AI can learn what kinds of patterns lead to the best outcomes, and then we can also embrace those patterns, and then it's a runaway train, hopefully, in the right direction. So Dembrane Echo, what we do here is we bridge real conversation and scalable data analysis. And again, I don't want to detract from the real hard work, the boots on the ground that are happening to make democratization happen all over the world at smaller scales in local cities and like wherever it needs to happen. But at some point, there's an information processing bottleneck where you get to sizes of maybe 500 to 1,000 people, where the ability to really synthesize what's happening in all the different kind of small group discussions gets completely overwhelmed. This is the kind of scale where Dembrane or where some kind of AI analysis can really help. So Echo is really simple. What we do is we have a little web app where you can record any conversation anywhere. Live, it gets transcribed and sent to our backend, and then we have an automated reporting pipeline that will help the host, the person organizing the event, to ask questions, find synthesis, find overlap, but also find where the disagreements are, so that we can actually focus on the things that matter. And we've used this tool to help groups of up to 500 people come together and find out what they have in common within 20 minutes. Which is kind of insane compared to normal approaches. So we've already helped 21 partners, and Evelyn's going to say more about that.
So a lot of tech talk, a lot of things that are happening, but let's bring it back for a second to what we actually do. So one example that we did is at TUE. I'm a graduate from there as well, so it's nice to now bring it back to school. They organized a session where they did a very long study. They wanted to know if the study resonated with people, and initially they were going to do that through a Q&A. 150 people signed up for this session. A Q&A, you might maybe hear 5 people, 6, and if they're really passionate, it might be 3. So what we said, coming in about 1.5 weeks in advance, if you really want to know if this resonates and if people recognize the problems that you have found through your research, you need to let them talk to each other. So in moments, we changed our entire program, allowing all these 150 people to go into small groups with each other. We recorded all these conversations and then made sure that all voices were heard and all reflections were captured to then bring that back. And rather than having 5 or 6 reactions, we actually gave everybody a chance to talk about it, but also to connect with each other. Another example is what we did for the city of Den Bosch, where we used the tool as a audio survey. So normally surveys can be quite challenging because it's hard to capture the richness of why somebody thinks something. You just have your options and you can choose. But also it's pretty difficult to really phrase what you're experiencing and thinking into text, unlike telling a story. Telling a story is something we've been doing since the beginning of time, and this way we really tried to open up the space for people that might not read as easy or write as easy or just can't see their phone screen, the letters that well anymore. Just press the button and tell your story. And this way we collected almost 200 stories in a month's time where people could really share. And with a click of the button, you had an idea of what the common themes were. And these were then used later on for actually shaping the citizen input evening. Another one for a local ministry, they had sessions with 10 different workshops, a whole afternoon long. Everybody had their own expertise, but at the same time working in a silo, working in one domain with the complexity of the challenges that we're facing is actually not that useful. So people wanted to know what was being discussed in other places, but yeah, as most people, you can only be in one spot at a time. So what we help do is by capturing all the dialogue that was happening at all these different workshops and then showing them what were actually the common challenges and what was something that was coming back in every single table, so that when the ministry was going to make steps to help these people, they could actually also see which solutions might be able to help different people at once.
I really love the top insight for that group, by the way. To manage transitions on the streets, you must also manage the transition between the spreadsheets.
Final case study. This was a company that wanted to define their strategy in the coming years, wanted to do that in a co-creation, collaborative way, and just get a first input. What are our ambitions? What are our values? What are we trying to achieve? And just by recording these sessions, we could give a first analysis, give a first moment of feedback, because they were in a time crunch, and they could take these insights straight into the board. And like the project manager said, we saved them a lot of effort by just having so much data so quickly ready for them that he just had to change 1 or 2 words and he could go to the next step already.
We always like to kind of frame what's at stake here, and it's important from both perspectives. From the democracy side, there's so much amazing work that's being done by tireless people working day in, day out on democratization in local, in important situations. But if we don't manage to get that information processing bottleneck lifted, then we're never going to be able to all have the feeling like we can contribute to our democracies in the way that we want to. And that can be really challenging. I mean, polarization is going up. If polarization goes up, we have more conflict, less democracy, bad cycle. On the other hand, AI, right? If we don't figure out ways in which that we can learn to steer AI, not only technically, which is a separate and a very, very important discussion, but also in terms of our values and what we believe in, then we're also going to be kind of stuck in this hopeless cycle of AI just doing whatever it wants to do, or big AI companies doing whatever they want to do. So we always like to frame the whole discussion like this, because that is what's at stake.
And so we really believe that this new generation of tech can really help us free up some of the challenges that we face today and help us become more human by not having to worry if everything is captured and taking the notes and having impossible handwriting from people, making sure that all ideas are actually captured, because as you will see, there are fantastic ways of doing that, as Cocosmos will do, but there is a lot of processes where that is not the case, unfortunately, and so much information and energy from people gets lost. And to raise the floor, rather than raising the bar, we want to make sure that whenever there is anything happening, that the data is safe and that the ideas are stored without too much technical difficulties. So that's what the future that we see and want to contribute to. In the end, we hope that Dembrane makes it then easier and invites people again to talk together, to come to understanding, because the media loves to talk about the polarization, but whenever I meet someone, I always find common grounds and we always have similar interests. That doesn't mean we're all aligned, but it doesn't mean that we're not willing to learn and listen to another person. And that feeling of connecting and talking to each other is what enables us to feel connected again, and what creates a sense of community, values that we share, and a mission to go for. We're Dembrane, and we believe that people know how. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your inspirational presentation. Well, I have a question. What was the biggest challenge that you were facing?
Now or in the past?
Whatever, you can choose. Well, make it personal. In your process.
For me personally, I had a beautiful talk with a developer yesterday, an open source developer. He's been working for 25 years in the public sector. And he said, he showed me a problem that he was working on, and he said, I had the code within 15 minutes because AI. The code is no longer difficult. What's difficult is who's going to be held accountable if this goes wrong? What's the legal process? Who are the lawyers I need to call? That's what's hard. And I think that's also what we're seeing right now. The code isn't hard. What's hard is convincing decision makers to use better tools. What's hard is actually convincing decision makers that when they have the feedback, when they have the Dembrane report, to actually do something with it, implement those ideas. And for that, you just need boots on the ground, you need influence and people, and that's a hard problem. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Now we will start with the presentation. We will have, you can ask questions later on, because first we will start with the presentation of Cocosmos design. Big applause for Evelien, for Aya and Filemon.
Oh, is deze van je?
Ja, deze is van mij.
Oh. Yes. Oh ja. Ja. Oh, hello everyone. Good evening. My face went a bit sad because we are missing our fonts, I can see. So apologies for the aesthetics of the slides. We care, we are designers as well, but researchers too. My name is Filemon, I'm the founder of Cocosmos, and together with Aya, I will share about our work, and later we will reflect indeed on what we saw earlier this evening. We're also curious about all of your backgrounds and what you guys do, so that we can put that into the mix. I'll use this. Yeah, maybe you have seen some of these objects and installations around in Eindhoven. Because we are based in Eindhoven, we work a lot in our own city as well. We also live in our own city, so that's nice to work on the city where you live. And this is the way that you can recognize us in the streets or in the Klokgebouw during Dutch Design Week or anywhere in neighborhoods. And we will share some examples and we will tell you what this means, the things that you're seeing right now. So we say Cocosmos, we say we are design researchers and we look for future perspectives. And you can say perspective or perspectives because we are looking for the differences in how people see the future and what is desirable in the future. And we do that mainly in transitions because we are at a certain point in time right now where we see a lot of things are changing and are coming towards us, and we try to bring people towards the new future that's ahead of us and see what is the added value for me. What does it mean for my lifestyle? What are the benefits that are coming my way, but also what are the challenges that we are facing and how do I respond to that? Because in general, people do not like change that much. We are not wired for change in our brain, but there are opportunities in change. So we are optimistic, we are progressive in that sense, and we expect that future holds something better for you and me. And that is the question. What are the stakes? What are the needs for different people? And that's what we research, and then we bring it into imagination of people. From where do we do that? This is our home base. It's pretty close to where we are now. It's the Schellens Fabriek, the Schellens factory, the old textile factory, and it's a nice monumental location to do future work. So that's a nice thing to start from. Here you see our team. We are with about 17 people right now, of which 10 work 4 to 5 days with us, and we started 3.5 years ago. So this also happens very fast. We are, just like Dembrane, growing very fast and in the beginning phase. But that means that we have a lot of young people who are enthusiastic to work on the future together. And we all have an industrial design background from the TU in Eindhoven. Also some other backgrounds are coming in right now, but that's our core because we do the research part and the design part. And of course my little dog Kobe, who is also here. Very, yeah, just, but she's behaving, so that's good. All right, so the co in co-creation stands for the co in Cocosmos stands for co-creation. Co means together in Latin, and Cosmos stands for the city, for cosmopolitans, people who inhabit the city. And we also do work in villages, of course. It's not that we only work in cities, but cities are like small societies where everything comes together and sometimes is being put under pressure because everything comes together in the city in a smaller scale, and we need to collaborate with each other about space, about policies, about how we behave towards each other. So that's why we look at that space. Then, yes.
So actually, we are curious who is with us in this building right now. So I'm curious who is also a designer. Please stand up. All the designers here.
Or raise your
Some of my
hands.
colleagues in
Yeah.
the back. All right. All right. Quite some designers. Nice to see you guys here. Welcome. Then who is working in tech? Who is working in a tech company? All right. All right. And who is working in the public sector, or for a governmental institution?
Oh, wait, in
Public sector.
for the
Nice. And who of you is an architect, or working in the built environment? Yeah, nice to see you. Welcome. Great. Yeah, great to have an impression. We have quite a diverse group today, so it's really nice. Also nice for the discussion with you all.
Yeah, and we'll take you through some of the key aspects that are playing a role in our work, and then we will go to some examples. So the first part of our work is the verdieping, so going into depth in the context. Because when you're talking about a transition, you're always talking from not a point zero or a vacuum. There's always a situation and a context at the moment, so we want to understand what is happening, what are the things that are going on in people's minds, what are their dreams, ambitions, how do they see their lives at the moment and in the future.
So for example, you can see on the picture the we call street conversations we did in the Biesenmarktel area to really talk with the people at the soccer club about their dreams for the future of their neighborhood.
Yeah, and we do that by going to the hotspots and the hot times. So that means the hotspots are the places where people are generally in their daily life, and the hot times is when they are at those places, and we make sure that we are there as well. So that's our way of democratizing the conversation. We will find the people, they do not have to find us. And people will, at the Piaggio for instance, they will participate without having to go to a certain evening or without consciously taking the time to think about a certain topic. We bring the topic into their daily lives, and then people also give more frank answers. They are surprised by why we are there, but also they have a spontaneous answer that says more about you than when you think about something for a long time and give a very cognitive answer. And the importance of looking at different places to find different people is to be representative in our participation. So get different age groups, different income levels, different study backgrounds, all those demographics. But also because research shows that if you bring different perspectives together, you will get more innovative ideas and more innovative problem-solving solutions. So we are also focused on that in our work because we design the solutions, we design the instruments for people to come together to co-create the solutions. Here are some examples of the transitions that we are working on, but we will get to that later. Then another aspect of our work that is important is connecting with people, because we see that also connecting to the story of Dembrane, that when people talk in a group, you get a different level of conversation than when you speak one-on-one, and especially if we are the conversation partner. We are usually, not actually always, the independent party. So we work for government or for a developer or for someone who makes policy, and we go and discover the actual needs and the wishes and the pains and gains of the people who are stakeholders in a certain issue. And we can do that pretty well. We can listen, we can really deeply listen, and we get a lot of stories. But when people explain themselves to each other and compare their stories, you get another level of conversation. So it's important for us to create places where people connect, and that's why we also do a lot of events or public space interventions.
Yeah, so for example, with the Cososmos project, maybe some of you know it, it's active in Eindhoven. It's to decrease energy poverty in households in Eindhoven. And we installed different like bus stops kind of within different areas where also people can come together and also ask questions to our colleagues about energy poverty and about making their homes more sustainable, to get the conversation going within neighborhoods, to make sure that the communities also talk about this topic and lower the threshold to make your own home sustainable as well.
Yeah, And for us, when we work on projects, we think of co-creation in the sense that everyone is an expert of their own experience. So someone can be an expert on a discipline which they studied, but someone can also be an experience expert. If, for instance, if you speak to someone who studies about traffic, they can have all kinds of studies about your street, but if you live in that street, you know how the street's being used, and you know that certain street where makes noise, for instance, with the latest scooter or something like that. So people have expertise, and that's why they are co-creators. They do not become designers, they do not become discipline experts, but especially that expertise about experience is what we really need when we work on a future city. Then another element of our work is surprise. You will notice that everything in Dutch starts with a V. That works really well. The surprise element is a part of interaction. We always do something that makes people interact with us or interact with the world around them, or play a game, for instance, or do a physical challenge in a way so that you start thinking differently. That's based in all kinds of theories. I did a promotion research before I started Cocosmos, so I have a research background, and maybe some of you know about phenomenology, which is the philosophy that we experience the world by interacting with it and by being in it, and we relate to the world, and that's why we understand certain meanings and we give meaning to the world. We also do that in interaction with other people. So all these kind of concepts, very subtly, because if someone of you is interested in philosophy, you might think it's going very fast now towards these kind of interventions. But that thinking is behind our work, because if you interact physically, you speak to a different part of your inner sense making than only your brains and your cognitive understanding of the world. And if we understand deeply what's going on with people, what are their frustrations or their drivers, what motivates them, what moves them, then we can really work on plans for the built environment, for policy making, that really makes sense for people in the future. The examples will come later. Yeah. So in designing, I told you already, we design tools for bringing people together and for bringing these insights towards the surface. And it's very interesting that when we design something, it's always a tool also to make difficult topics easier to discuss and to bring different people together in a sort of safe space. Because if you do something together, you have a way of interacting or a game to play or a certain table to stand around, then that makes for a new relation between the people. Also when people have very different stakes, very different opinions, or very different power balance. Then the last one is imagination. We think it's our duty to spark the imagination of the participants who are thinking about the future. So often what you see in traditional participation is that people are being asked, what would you like, or what do you want, or what do you wish for the future? But that's a super difficult question to answer. So we think as designers, it's our duty to create tools for people to imagine the future, and the surprise elements work with that, but also we have a different array of tools, but we like to design something for each different topic and project, so that people themselves don't have to become designers, but can think more visually, so that their brains get stimulated as well into possibilities instead of what we know now what's possible. We need to think and open the opportunity space for people.
Maybe one nice example can be the FOMO project, which really relates to imagining and also surprising effect.
Before? No.
Yeah, so the FOMO project, the municipality had the question, how can we understand the lives of youth in Eindhoven? And from this, we designed the FOMO Festival, which is a festival for youth in Eindhoven, where they can come and be immersed in different experiences, which are in the containers, so it has a really surprising element. You don't know what's inside from the outside. And throughout the experience, you really answer questions about your life as a young adult. And we really noticed that people and young people are really open in these conversations, which is super valuable. And this has been a project which has been going on for 3 years in a row in the city center of Eindhoven. And it has
Yes, and another example of our work is our work on Knoop XL, which is the area around the station and especially the north side of the station of Eindhoven, the Felle Noord right now. And that area right now is not an area that you really can experience other than while being in traffic in your car, because the bikes are going underneath it. You cannot really walk there, and the cars are there in rows of 6 or 7. And that whole area will become a new neighborhood and actually an extension of the city center of Eindhoven, which is, as you can imagine, hard to imagine. So that's a project that we work on where we use the Dutch Design Week as a tool actually each year to make a new step together with visitors. Because Knoop XL is also something of a scale that relates to the Brainport region and relates to Eindhoven in 20 years' time, for instance, where we do not only participate with people who are here at the moment, but people who might potentially come here later on in life. So that's why the Dutch Design Week is a good tool, because then visitors from all around come to Eindhoven and they can experience Knoop XL already a little bit in the installations that we put up during the Dutch Design Week. And in the end, you can see that we've created a book, an inspiration book, where we collected all the insights from 2 Dutch Design Weeks, gathered them, themed them, so that's a bit of the work that Dembrane was talking about. And we do that in our way with qualitative analysis, and we created insight cards that the developers who get the go to build here, they use our book to actually relate their plans towards the needs that visitors, users of the area and people who already live here have given to them. So there are recommendations here that every developer received from the municipality. So that's one of the successes, you could say, that you were asking about, that something really has impact and really gets a voice in the development process. And the last one is a concrete example of, you might have heard about burgerberaden, that's citizen councils, if I say it correctly. We did a buurtberaad, so a bit of a smaller scale around Winkelcentrum Woensel, because that's going to be a neighborhood as well. So that's also something that's hard to imagine, because it's a shopping center, but it will become a residential area with a lot of facilities that are not there at the moment. And here we flyered in the houses of 9,000 addresses, and we had people sign up for the buurtberaad, and we told them it will be a selection because we need to have a representative group, and everybody was super understanding of that. Of course, the municipality thought it was a bit tricky, because if someone wants to talk, why would you not just let them speak? But everybody who was there, they were really committed to the process, because they were selected to be there and to be a voice for their community. And in the end, they voiced 10 recommendations for the developers of the city heart. What's the future of Woensel? And those recommendations go to the city council. They get established in all the official parts. So that's also something that has an impact in the future. Those are the examples that we wanted to share today. So let's go to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's so inspirational that it's all about the experience and also opening up conversations. What was the most new insight that you got on a project?
I think the question you're asking is actually really interesting, because usually we try to dive into a topic without first having our own assumptions. So I'm gonna be really annoying and say that all the insights are really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you go into a project and you start without assumption, for sure. But sometimes the experience that you get is so different than you expected before. Still, without assumptions, you can still be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for instance, usually we come to a nuance that you wouldn't have before, and that's, I think, really rewarding, and I feel very enriched by that. And now I'm thinking about a project that we did where there was a lot of green in the neighborhood, and people were happy about the green, but there were also, and they felt like herders of the green in their neighborhood, but there were also people that were shielded off from other neighbors by the same green. And they felt lonely because of the green. and the green gave too much shade in their house and their garden, so they felt cold and lonely. And at the same time, people were so proud of this green neighborhood. So those are like nuances that we discover, and then we are very grateful for that. And then we have the task to communicate the nuance of the green.
Wow, very interesting. Evelien and Joram, would you also like to join? Because I also heard we had a small conversation before, and I've heard that you already did a collaboration together. We have to share a mic.
Oh, yeah.
Now.
We did a pilot.
You did a pilot. Please enlighten us. What kind of pilot did you do?
Well, it was really early Dembrane days, so I interviewed Filemon for my graduation thesis, because I think Filemon is one of the designers who know what to care about in participation. So that inspired me a lot already. And also, so when we were starting testing, she was the person I wanted to bring the tool to and to get her feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also what the pilot was. So the FOMO festival that you saw before, we helped record some of the conversations that were happening at the time. Maybe you can
Yeah.
tell them.
And how was it for you?
Exciting, and we are, of course, we have a technical background as well, so we do believe, let's say, and we always like to try something new and something innovative, and of course we know the grind of going through the research data. We know it, but we do it because we have a dedication to the result. And in the pilot that we did, we saw quite some things that could be optimized in a sense, but at the same time we are very careful about it because we feel that the process is very delicate of doing the analysis, finding interpretation, and sticking with the data and staying very close to the raw data. So that's where our reflections landed as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think in the process we've worked with more research-oriented people that are like really looking at the data that they collect as like a gold mine that you really have to be careful with. And realize that the tool that we're building is not meant for that. Like, it's not meant for that kind of work because you need to, like you said, being close to the data kind of brings more out of it. What we realized from that and also from subsequent collaboration is that it's really about those moments where you're talking to hundreds plus people and the turnaround time for the need for feedback is really quick. And that's when you get AI, that's when AI becomes really useful. Obviously, you know, if you have 1,000 people discussing with each other, you could write a PhD about that. But we can't afford that now, or the government can't. So that's when you get that nuance, and I think that was a really valuable collaboration to discover that. Yeah.
Because I feel like your more approach is more like a smaller groups.
Yeah, so not necessarily, because the FOMO festival is 300 participants each year.
Yeah.
And then we do the analysis, in person, but it's possible, it's very possible.
Yeah.
But it depends, that's our work. I think that's what you're saying, that's our job.
Yeah, that's the grind of, the research in person. You get a lot out of it, you get a lot of nuance out of it. And I think the Dembrane kind of approach is a different trade-off, I think, of just of returns versus time spent.
Yeah.
So for us, 300 people, we can do a pretty decent analysis in less than 10 minutes. Versus, you know, if you really want to milk everything out of those conversations, you've got to take 6 months. And that's that trade-off.
Or a crazy month.
Yeah, crazy month.
Because I saw the data files.
A lot of work. Well, we have, you already analyzed the audience for us. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the audience? We have a mic over there. Yeah, do you want my mic or do you want to stand? Yeah.
So for Membrane, so the problem with using AI for a lot of people is the kind of assumptions or the pre-training or the training or the kind of decisions that are already made by who is developing the AI. How do you deal with that? Do you also have to be careful with this kind of assumptions? Are there assumptions within your program?
100% there are assumptions. I think if you were to record really, really difficult conversations, then our method becomes a little bit more contentious. What we notice is that the AI kind of like pre-training doesn't interfere with analysis if you're talking about like I don't know, cycling infrastructure or something like that, but it can interfere if you're talking about, or if there are people that have very, very contentious views, then those views tend to be filtered out more than you'd like. So that's something that we take extra care to do. For example, with the DemBoss project, we had 197 people participate. When I was going through the data a little bit, like I had kind of the initial analysis, and like you said, it kind of screamed liberal to me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I dived in and I asked it to say, like, okay, make a report from the perspective of somebody that disagrees with your analysis. And then it said things like, oh, actually there's some people that are really opposed to the kind of like phasing out of cars from the inner city. And I was like, oh, interesting. So we have some techniques that, for example, this technique of like having two agents, one of them that's just trying to provide a summary and the other one that's interrogating that summary and saying like, what are you missing out on, what's not being said, that can help. On the other hand, we're also just looking into open source models that don't have the same kind of pre-training that, for example, OpenAI or Anthropic do have, and that can help as well.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very much. Yes.
We have another question.
Hi, also for Dembrane question. I'm going to be devil's advocate for a minute. What if you, for the lack of a better word, weaponize your system and use it to do bad? I mean, and I just think of Cambridge Analytica and how a really nice system by a Hungarian scientist became something that really influences outcomes of elections and stuff like that. How do you intend, I mean, I'm not saying you're doing it, on the contrary, but I think it's very interesting, but this, yeah.
Well, I think the terrifying reality of technology is, in the end, there is a moment when you're no longer in control of how people use it, and whether that is AI or something much more physical. Products become real the moment they're in the hands of people. We have standard safety procedures, guidelines, of course, in place. Anything that is harmful, given a standardized ethical framework, will be flagged. There will be reports on that, and conversations can stop. But right now, we're not at that point yet because of this reason. We really want to make sure that we develop a tool first with the communities who are now struggling and really want to come together to make an impact, to make their neighborhood better, but don't have access to a fantastic team like Cocosmos and just need to do it themselves and are struggling with post-its and surveys and all the data that is everywhere. That is where we start right now, understanding how people use it in this context, and then from there being able to understand what to look out for.
I also want to ask the question back to you, because I'm curious why you asked this question. But maybe you want to answer, you want to reflect on it?
There's just one extra level on that, right? Which is you can build a tool and then just kind of throw it out into the world and say anybody can use it. That can be a good approach or a bad approach. The question is that I ask myself, because I, in the beginning, definitely lay up awake at night, like, what if this goes wrong? What would that look like? And I think the difference is, like, what are you enabling? What we're enabling is for people to easily get QR codes for people to record conversations and then analyze those conversations. So in theory, it could be used for, I don't know, spying, for example. Like that you're recording conversations without people's consent, and then you're then collecting that data. That's something that we can track just because of the kind of the questions that are being asked and that kind of thing. So that wasn't too scary for me. And then I realized that anything that we can build, somebody else can build in, an hour, 2 hours with AI. Like, there's really nothing special about the technology that we're building. It's true. It's just AI plus a CRUD application. CRUD applications have been around for 20 years. It's nothing new. What's new is how you're implementing it, in which communities, with which cities, with which ministries, right? That's where you're making the impact. And so I kind of realized, hey, if somebody wants to start a covert AI spying operation, they would not use Dembrane, like, ever. So that made me less scared.
To answer your question, because I read an article about the Hungarian scientist that came up with the principle that basically fed into Cambridge Analytica. And I thought it was really interesting because he devised a system to analyze all kinds of opinions and tastes and preferences. And very quickly in a mathematical model managed to actually do something, summarizing it. I don't know exactly because I'm not a mathematician, I'm a designer, but he managed to do something good with it. And then he got the scholarship to come to London and became part, and it became Cambridge Analytica. And then suddenly it kind of, with a lot of money and other people that thought, well, we can use this for something completely different, it became something really bad in a way. Because I think influencing people for a specific outcome is bad. And whether you do it consciously or not. And the reference to what you just said about, listening into phones, I'm convinced all of our phones are being listened to. I mean, and I'm not being a conspirationalist or whatever you want to call it, because there's so many signs that it actually already happens. So.
Thank you for your answer, and I think this is more to talk about during drinks, for sure. I think I have a question for the both of you, and it could be a bit combining because now the questions. Are there more questions from anyone? Yeah, Barbel? Before I start asking questions. Also a bit a mean one. Talking about privacy regulations, both of you, how are you dealing with it? I remember when we were doing projects for Philips, that took quite a lot of our budget to get that arranged. So I'm curious how you do that while being in the street or being in a meeting.
Yeah, it's interesting. We tend to ask people their postal codes, their zip codes, so that we can look at the demographic representation, and people quite easily still give them to us. Sometimes we are surprised about that, actually. But we identify ourselves, we tell them what's the purpose of our conversation, to whom are we giving this information, this data, and it's anonymous when we speak to people most of the time. Then we don't sign anything. If it's that, then we don't sign anything, but if it's about a picture or about a personal reference or a quote, then we do have consent forms, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, on our side as well, right? Privacy regulations are regulations. We have lawyers. We walked through the whole process with the lawyers. They were like, yeah, this looks good. Like, it's what it comes down to is like, did they check a box that says that they read the privacy agreement? Yeah, exactly. So you have the QR code, and then obviously, like in the privacy, in our privacy document, we say don't record people without their consent. But that's not something that we can control. So, yeah.
And maybe also on top of that, like we do a lot of the record the sessions that are happening in person. One of the guidelines that we tell to any facilitator that uses our tool, only start it after your introduction round, because we don't care who is talking, we care about the ideas. And that's also what we tell to people. It's not about being able to trace it back to you, it's about what you create here together and what you discuss. That is what we capture. And that is also to give a peace of mind to the people who are exposed to Dembrane.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe more towards the democratization part of the open about privacy. So I just explained that we talk about the goal, why we are asking certain questions. That's also part of GDPR, right? You need to explain what the goal is of your data collection. But we find it extra important that people can see what we did with their data. So we validate, did we listen to you correctly? Did we interpret you correctly? And that's usually online so that everybody can access it after we meet them spontaneously on the streets, because of course we don't collect email addresses at that point. So we really ask for feedback, like did we do a good job, and only then will we proceed to the next step.
Are there more questions? No? Well, I have a question because we are here at the Innovation Café and we are talking about the future of Eindhoven. How can you use your talents with co-creation for Eindhoven? You're already doing it, you told us, because you live in Eindhoven. You're a citizen of Eindhoven and you work with Eindhoven, also for the city of Eindhoven. How can you use your talents more? What could you advise to the city of Eindhoven?
It's a really big question. I think Eindhoven right now, there's so many challenges. The main one, I think, also that I personally experience is the housing crisis or the growth that Eindhoven is going through right now. And I think the power of co-creation, and also why I love my work so much, is that we talk with people living in Eindhoven and research what do they see in the future and how do they envision the future of their neighborhood or their city, and then connect that to, okay, so how can the city make policy based on those insights to really make sure that the future of Eindhoven, which is going to be a bigger city, is also a city still for the current people living here, and not only kind of nice apartments for the rich people, just to say it really bluntly. but to really be an inclusive city, which also really has room for everyone in Eindhoven.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's also very important that every citizen feels like he's been heard by the city.
Yeah,
and that's
not
also
only feels, but also sees it
of course.
in the reality, and also throughout the growth that Eindhoven is going through right now, not only after all the big buildings are here, but also throughout the process that people are included.
Wow, thank you. And for you?
I think for Dembrane, a really important element is to keep the conversation going. So once you have been somewhere and you got the data, that's not necessarily the end of it. There is so much more that comes afterwards, and that conversation, I think, in the smart city that we're going towards is going to be very important, because we have smart sensors all over the city, and based on that we're trying to make data-driven decisions. But the people data, what we talk about, what we care about, how we experience that, how do we capture that? And I think that is something that we should not underestimate, because that's where the slogan comes from. People know how, and Cocosmos said it too. People are local experts. They know things that only they will know because they have been there for so long. And as we get smarter, incorporating that knowledge from people is crucial in actually making a smart city.
Okay, thank you so much. A big applause for Cocos Design and Embrace. For next week, we have another Innovation Café with 2 speakers. We have Team Casa and we have New Zwanenburg. So please come and join us together. But first, before we end, we will have some drinks together. And I hope you enjoy, and we talk further about these teams that we discussed. Thank you so much. Annemoon, do you want to say anything? No?
Yeah.
Thank you by Annemoon as well.
Let's do it on the mic, because then it's everyone can hear, and also at home. Thank you so much. I got really inspired. This is what design should do. Thank you.
Thank you
Have
so
a
much.
great evening. Hope to see you soon.
Ja, nou jullie deden het zelf al.